Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. My name is Lucas, aka Lucas R15 Sky, and today we're here with our New Zealand counterpart and friend, Michael Wagner, to discuss the first test between Bangladesh and New Zealand. Michael, this test really had everything: a couple of centuries, one from Kane Williamson, one from Chanto. High first innings scores by both teams, and then a sudden collapse in the fourth innings by New Zealand. Probably the only one that can hold his head up high was Daryl Mitchell with that half century. So what went wrong for New Zealand in this match?
Look, to be honest, the bowling in the start of the third innings, I think, was the biggest issue. But I think the main thing that went wrong, to be honest, was that Bangladesh played really well. If they hadn't played so well, we would have looked much better. That was a really good performance by Bangladesh. There was a couple of things that happened that were a bit disappointing. I think New Zealand were a little bit timid in the fourth innings, and you saw the two guys that actually attacked were Mitchell and Southey, and they both scored runs. Everyone else sort of poked and prodded a little bit, and as a result, eventually you were going to get a ball that had your name on it. And they found the balls that had their name on it. If they had a go at it, maybe they would have been all out for 130. But I think more likely we would have actually put some pressure on Bangladesh and moved some of those fielders back, and then less likely to have those those mishits getting caught. The classic was Devon Conway's dismissal in the fourth innings, where he got an inside edge, and there was a guy standing right there. Now, if he'd smacked a couple of deliveries, if he'd pulled a couple of those short ones straight at that guy, he would have been back a little bit, and he would have been more timid. He wouldn't have been standing there ready to catch that. That was purely down to the fact that he was under pressure. Bangladesh could keep the field up, and because they could keep the field up, it meant that there was someone there to catch that. So it was those little things. And if New Zealand had bowled out Bangladesh for, say, 60 or 70 runs fewer in that third innings, everything would have changed. That's really that made, and perhaps if New Zealand had have scored an extra 50 runs in their first innings as well, that really should have been a 360, 370 sort of innings there. And there was part of that was some good bowling. I mean, I thought that, for me, the guy that was actually the best bowler for Bangladesh was Shariful, the left-arm quick bowler. Their spinners did well, but Shariful, he managed to keep pressure on, even when there wasn't much in it. He picked up a couple of wickets and, a couple of key wickets. Henry Nicholls was looking really good in that first innings. And then Shariful came and got him, bang, straight away. And that was, and that actually was a pretty big moment in the game. So I feel like he was a real star for Bangladesh, even though he didn't get the numbers. But I think the other big thing was Ajaz Patel was just didn't bowl as well as we know he can. Yeah. He looked like a shadow of himself. He didn't look like he was an international quality bowler. And he's not just a reasonable bowler. He's an excellent bowler, but he did not bowl like that.
Bulldozer Williams had a question, and surprised to see Bangladesh do so well. Just on that, were you surprised the lack of consistency Ajaz Patel actually produced? Because we saw him in India, take a 10 wicket haul in one innings. He seemed like, as you said, a shadow within himself. Why was that?
Look, it's hard to know. I mean, I guess perhaps the bowling load, the fact that he was asked to do so much and come on so early, that we're in New Zealand, he tends to, when he's playing for CD, he tends to maybe not come on in the third or fourth over so often. He tends to be, he bowls with an older ball. He doesn't get the new ball unless he's already warmed up. So there could be a little bit of that, just that the feel was different. But it could also be that Bangladesh targeted him. They had a go. They thought, right, we need to hit him off his lines, because if we let him dominate us, he will dominate and he will pick up, 5 for 50 and win the game for New Zealand. And they didn't allow him to settle. They didn't allow him to settle into his rhythm. But they were very effective. I thought, I've seen there's a lot of complaints about Sodhi's bowling in the New Zealand cricket forums. And I think that's really unfair, because I think Sodhi actually got some pressure, put some pressure back on the batsman. Whereas Ajaz Patel was just a giant pressure release valve. He was just saying, oh, yeah, there's some pressure. Here's a freebie. Just just hit an easy single. Here's a freebie. Just take a 4. Just take 4 singles of this over. There's no pressure. You don't have to worry. You don't have to be scared. It was just disappointing. The lengths were wrong. The lines were wrong. It just wasn't, you want in Bangladeshi conditions, it's custom made for a finger spinner to just keep putting the ball on the spot and just their natural variation will do enough. And he just didn't do it. He wasn't consistent enough. Bangladesh played really well, and I didn't think they would. I thought they would be without Shakib, without Tamim, without Ebadot. I thought, there were some good players that weren't there. I didn't expect that they'd do as well as they did, but they were outstanding.
I thought our good friend James Butler from England, I said to him during a pre-show of the World Cup, I said Bangladesh were my disappointing team, apart from England, obviously, of the tournament. I thought they could have done a lot more, and they're at a stage now, Bangladesh, where you can't say, well, they're new to cricket. Considering what Netherlands are doing, considering what Afghanistan are doing. But he did make one good point. Bangladesh at home, once upon a time, you can play a second string attack there and you'd win. Those days, you can't do that no longer. You have to play a 4-strength team, and you need to have spinners to back up your ability, because what Bangladesh do have is good spinners. And I felt the spinners of Bangladesh were just far, far better than what New Zealand had. Now, I know New Zealand, Daniel Vittori is probably their greatest spinner. After that, probably not much, that prolificness. Where do you...
John Bracewell was New Zealand's greatest spinner. For me.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
John Bracewell was first. I mean, look, in tests, Vittori was young Vittori. Young Vittori was the best that we've had. But after he had a shoulder operation when he was 25, he was never the same bowler again. Yep. I think over the course of his career. But yeah, look, what we've seen. I mean, Ajaz Patel has shown in the past that he's capable of bowling really well, but he didn't do it in this.
Did you? Yeah, go on.
Go. You go.
I was going to say, did it shock you that the New Zealand spinners didn't get most out of this pitch compared to the Bangladesh spinners?
I was really disappointed on day 3. I think on day 4, we took, 7 wickets for 116 runs, and the spinners did all of the damage. I mean, that's kind of what we were expecting. And they did get it. Ajaz Patel got into some rhythm, and, Sodhi got into some rhythm. And that's what we expected to see. It just didn't happen. And I wonder if part of it was the lack of preparation, that, they had a 2-day practice match that they cancelled, and there was no other preparation. So it's one thing for the guys who were in the World Cup that were playing. They've just been playing a whole lot of cricket, but I don't know that Ajaz Patel or Henry Nicholls had been playing in New Zealand. Very, very different playing in New Zealand to playing in Bangladesh. Pre-game
during the coin toss, I heard Tim Southey say that they were actually been in Bangladesh for a while. Was that the case? Because he said that their preparation was pretty good. They've been in Bangladesh for a while, so we're going to come out, blah blah blah, and do what we have to do. Was that a fair estimate of that? What he said?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they went from the World Cup semi-final straight to Bangladesh.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
That long ago. It's a week. And look, to be fair, they were in Sylhet, which I don't know Sylhet. I only know really the south of Bangladesh. But you're in the hotels, and they're not a great place to be. Bangladesh is beautiful. The countryside in Bangladesh is absolutely stunning. But the cities in Bangladesh, not so much. Now, Sylhet looked awesome. What I saw of Sylhet looks like my favorite city in Bangladesh is Jessore. If you ever get a chance to go to Bangladesh, get out of Dhaka. Don't stay in Dhaka. Get down to Khulna and Jessore and the areas down in the Sundarban, around that area. Absolutely some of the most beautiful places in the world. But the fact is the cricketers wouldn't have the freedom to walk around like you or I would have, because they're big stars, and they'd get mobbed. And I mean, I was there around the time when the Australian team pulled out of the tour because of security fears. And they were genuine security fears. I've got to tell you, being a foreigner in Bangladesh at that time, I actually had armed police following me around to make sure I was safe, because there had been that many foreigners targeted. So it was kind of a bit scary having like 6 guys with machine guns walking around after me. But they were like making sure that the foreigners that were there were being looked after because they didn't want another incident. But like it was. That was just me as a normal person. You can imagine the security that would be required for the cricketers. I can't imagine it's a great place to be for 9-10 days if you can't go and train well. So I don't know how their training went, but there's not a lot else to do. I'd imagine they probably were training quite well. But look, training well is one thing, but you've got to actually play. Hey, but I do want to say massive congratulations to the ground staff at Sylhet and Bangladesh Cricket for what they did. That was an exceptionally good pitch. That was about as good a cricket pitch as you'll see. Now, look, would it have been nicer to have had a little bit more pace and bounce? Yes, it would have been nicer if swing lasted a little bit longer, but there was enough in it for the quicks on day 1 and day 2. And there was still something in it. Southie was still causing questions. Sharifa was still asking questions on days 3 and 4. Like that was a good pitch. And yes, it favoured the sort of bowlers that Bangladesh have. But the reason it favoured those sort of bowlers is because those bowlers developed like that because that's what Bangladesh pitchers favour. That's why those guys had success, and that's why they end up playing a lot. Is because those are the natural conditions that they play well in. It wasn't a doctored pitch. They picked the pitch that was going to produce the best cricket match, and that just happened to be what their players were familiar with. That was a really good pitch, and I think they did that was much better than any pitch I've seen in Bangladesh in the past.
Now, from a Bangladesh point of view, you probably don't want to hear this, but the biggest thing for me when it comes to Bangladesh cricket is consistency. Now, they've been up a few times 1-0 in series. These best of 2. They were 1-0 up against England. They were 1-0 up against Australia. And they were 1-0 up against New Zealand. What do they start needing to do to finish off these tours to actually win these series?
Well, I mean, they've done the first bit. You've got to win the first one. But look, I mean, they are. Well, I mean, you've got to say if they play as well in the second test as they played in the first test, they've got every chance of winning. They need to think about their bowling plans a little bit. But I think that what they were doing I think Shanto's a pretty good captain. I think some of the changes that they made, some of the fields they set were absolutely excellent. And but they will need to adjust them because the top teams evolve. They will have been watching, like New Zealand analysts will have been watching those plans. They will know exactly what Bangladesh were trying to do, and they'll be replicating in the nets, and they will come up with some way of beating that. Now, the question is, can Shanto come up with a plan B if the current plan doesn't work? And that's really where you go from being a good captain to being a great captain, is if you can do that, come up with a second plan. Because they've got some things that are working, that are tying the batsman down. They won't work the next match, in all likelihood. These guys are good. They'll adapt their game. They'll come out, and the question is, will Bangladesh have a good enough plan B? And that's part of what the really fascinating thing is going to be to see in this game. I mean, that was a good test match. It was close. Like the 150 run score at the end doesn't make it look like a close match, but it was close for 3.5 days. And that's it was really until the last session, well, probably the last session on day 3, that Bangladesh really finally got their noses ahead. And until that point, it was anyone's game. And that's great. It's a great test. And I hope we get to see another one like that.
Absolutely, and I hope from a Bangladesh point of view they can actually finish off a series. Like I said, they've been in a lot of positions in these two test series where they've actually gone up 1-0. As I mentioned, England and Australia. We'll wrap the show up. Actually, one quick before we go. Any changes you'd make for the second test, which begins in 4 days, the 6th of December? Any changes you'd make?
Yeah, look, I would. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but Ajaz Patel would step out and Mitchell Santner would come in. Now, I think the way Santner bowled in India and the way he's been bowling recently in first-class cricket suggests that he's turned a corner. He's better at getting drift and better at some. There's some of the little micro skills that you need in Bangladesh. I think he's actually I think he is a better option the way he's bowling than the way that Ajaz Patel's bowling. Rachin Ravindra's another one that's interesting. You sort of want to play him. I'm not sure where you'd play him because I don't think Phillips. I think Phillips showed enough to say that he should stay in the team. He's the only off spinner, so you got to have him there. You're not going to drop Mitchell. I don't think I'd drop Henry Nicholls. He's hit 400s in a row or something before this match. So you can't drop someone in that sort of form. Yep. So I don't know where you bring if you're going to bring Ravindra in. I don't know where you would, but maybe Ravindra in for Nicholls, perhaps. I also probably would have Blundell batting at 7 and Phillips batting at 6. I think Blundell's one too high, but it's a fairly minor quibble. But I do also have to say, Kane Williamson. It's very easy to not notice how good this guy is. In his last 80 tests, he's averaging roughly 60. 80 tests. That's not a short time. His career figures now are almost identical to Garfield Sobers as a batsman, who we'd say is one of the greatest of all time. Roughly the same number of matches as Sobers, roughly slightly more runs at a slightly better average than Sobers, and more hundreds than Sobers. He's now. You've got to say this has gone beyond just saying, oh well, he's had a few good matches. Over the last 10 years, he's averaged better than anyone, better than Steve Smith. Since Martin Crowe put out his thing about the top 10, he's now fully about the big four. He's fully averaging something like 12 more than Joe Root and 15 more than Kohli, something like that in that 9-year period. I mean, he is a properly good player, and we haven't had many batsmen of that quality from New Zealand. It's quite nice to have one. Well, there haven't been many guys that average 60 in Test match cricket in Test history. It just doesn't happen that often. So, another 100 in this match from him. He's scored simply from the time he turned 30. He's played the same number of matches as Don Bradman, scored roughly the same number of runs and hit the same number of centuries as Don Bradman. But that's a pretty good name to be comparing with. Not many people you can say, oh yeah, his numbers are similar to Bradman. I mean, that's extraordinary stuff. Since he turned 30, he has really become a phenomenal player.
Well, we'll get more into Kane Williamson in the next Test match in the full review. I think if he wasn't from New Zealand, he'd be talked about more, but that's a conversation for next week. Anyway, Michael, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate your time. And hopefully, for your sake, New Zealand will win the next Test match and draw the series. And you can get some points on the board for the World Test Championship.
That would be nice.
Fantastic.
All right.
Anyway, thank you for watching. Follow Michael Wagner on Twitter, Michael Wagner, me, Lucas R15 Sky. And hopefully we will be back for the second Test match. And Michael, thank you and goodbye.